Join Town Pump's Pump It Up Rewards Plus program and never pay full price for fuel again.
Save 5 cents on every gallon every day at any Town Pump across Montana.
Plus, earn and redeem points on your favorite in-store items to get free stuff with our clubs.
Stop in and pick up a rewards card. Download the Pump It Up Rewards Plus app today.
Or visit townpump.com/rewards to register and start saving.
Town Pump. Right down the road. Pump it up. Oh, yeah.
Riding with Ryder back for another week, and Montana State into a bye with an 8-0 record. Best start for the Bobcats since 1978. So pretty darn impressive what we've seen so far. Mike, I'll start with this. A little bit of a litmus test for the people that were able to watch Montana State, Portland State, and then also watch North Dakota State, South Dakota State. Did you get a chance to see NDSU and South Dakota State?
Yeah, I did. I caught a handful of snaps, not it entirely, just given kid stuff, some Halloween stuff. It was, kind of one of those afternoons. But did get to see both games. Fun to see a side-by-side and naturally a measuring stick game. You're looking at Montana State, kind of measuring it up to be like, what do they look like versus, North Dakota State, South Dakota State. Hard to do that, I guess, but you naturally have that tendency. And then looking at Portland State, I haven't seen a Portland State team. They just didn't look very competitive. They didn't have a lot of fight. Yeah. They usually have some fight. They've got some talent here and there. That was just a really poor performance. They did not look very good. And that's not I know they've got injuries and things like everybody else, but I just was pretty underwhelmed given some of the talent that they have, especially at the quarterback position.
Man, I was thinking the same thing. It's funny because these cliches sort of manifest themselves. Portland State's made the playoffs twice in the last 25 years, right? So they've never been some sort of a juggernaut. But I think there's this perception around a lot of people around Montana that think, oh, well, Portland State's never been any good. It's actually not true. I was going through the history of it. I mean, Tim Walsh finished in the top 3 in the league 12 times in 16 years. It's Portland State was always pretty good. They just weren't as good as Montana State, and Eastern Washington, but they were always pretty good compared to everybody else, all the way up until 2015 when Bruce Barnum first took over. I mean, they won 9 games that year. They went to the playoffs. They haven't been able to get over the top since then. But even the last couple years, I mean, Portland State went 4-4 in league 3 years in a row. It's not crazy good, but it's not over. This team.
No, it's a tough league.
I couldn't believe it, man. Usually, Portland State, you're thinking, okay, you got to show up there. You got to show up there and you got to figure out a way to win. They're going to have talent. They're going to punch you in the face a couple times. They're going to fight back at least. I couldn't believe what I watched on Saturday. There was guys making business decisions. There was guys not wanting to make tackles. It was really weird, man. It was a really weird scenario to watch. Cats played great, but Portland State was like a no-show.
It was a combination of both, but it was hard to not. Yeah, I mean, look at it 28 points there in the second quarter without really any defensive, pressure at all or, really bowing their neck at all. I mean, it was just 7-0 after, quarter one, but just, another 300-yard rushing game. They gave up over 600 yards on defense. And then, Dante Sachre, 64 yards, I think, through the air, 4 yards on the ground. He was the player of the conference player of the week before. It's just hard to even figure that out. You're at home. I don't know. It was perplexing, but all in all, still, dominant performance by the Cats and playing on the road's hard. And we talked about it the week before, and your run game should travel, and it did. Clearly, they did what they wanted. They took everything that they wanted throughout the entire football game, and good to get some reps for some of those younger guys, Colter, which I think is needed. Guys like Neil Daly getting a start. I don't know. I know his stats look good. I think it was 6 tackles and a sack, and did pretty well against an opponent that's inferior. But I'm eager to see what takes the field on the road again here in 2 weeks against Eastern. Big bye week, obviously goes without saying. They need it in a variety of positions. So I hope this bye week comes at a good time for them. I think it does.
When it comes to measuring between Montana State and the 2 Dakota Powers, you're right, it's impossible unless you see them on the field together. But I will say there's been a lot of times in the past. I mean, we get to watch North Dakota State and South Dakota State quite a bit just because of the crossover. A lot of times there's non-conference games.
Yep.
And I always try to tune in when they play each other because it's always just a fun, good game.
Yep.
Most of the time when I watch them, I'm like, oh man, those teams are way better than the Montana schools. Those teams are way better than the teams in the Big Sky. Hard to measure until we see them really on the field against each other, but I don't think it's that far away. From what I saw, just my basic observations watching Montana State and then those two, I think the Cats are just as good, if not better, offensively than any of the three that we're talking about. I do think Cam Miller is the biggest difference maker that anybody's got right now, North Dakota State's
Yep.
quarterback. And I think that South Dakota State's got this toughness that is just so extreme. You can just see it showing through. NDSU's battling with injuries right now. The best way I could say it is if Montana State, North Dakota State, or Montana State and South Dakota State was to play next week, I think the Cats could score points and move the ball. I just don't know how the other side would work. I don't know how the Cats defense would stack up
Yeah.
against either of those offenses, but it's not as far away as it has been in recent years. And that's a testament to Montana State's rise. And also, I think those two schools are still really, really good. I just think, I mean, that South Dakota State team last year was, I mean, they put 11 guys in the NFL. That's as stacked as a team as you're going to get. So not that far away, at least in my, single day observation.
Yeah, I would agree with you. The other interesting thing to consider, and we're at this point of the year, and I love looking at the Hero Sports bracketology and looking at the projections. That's us. Now it's you were heading into late October in November, where these last 5-6 games they really do determine those seedings, and I think it's so even across the Dakotas and Montana, the Montana school, especially Montana State this season in particular. But you do have to start factoring in like that home field advantage. It is just such a big deal in the playoffs. And I think we're going to see it at the FBS level now that we got a 12-team playoff. That will be interesting. But I think it could be a toss-up between those three schools, and that home field advantage is so big. And that's what you're playing for right now. I mean, if you're MSU, the 1-0 mentality, I know that's their calling card, and I absolutely love it. They did a good job of that. And you got to find a way to win the bye week this week, and then take the show on the road, and you got Eastern, and still got Sac, and then you got UC Davis, you got the Griz. So there's still a lot of work cut out for them. But that home field advantage, Colter, it's so pivotal at the FCS level, given the situation with teams that don't play in front of large crowds. The three teams in North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Montana, those for the four teams that draw so well in comparison to everybody else. You've got to factor that in. And so I think long-winded answer, but I think the winner goes to, and you hedge your bet on the home field advantage because it is so substantial for all four of those teams.
And the history's played out too. I mean, it's the advantage, but it's also just the travel and the familiarity and all that sort of stuff. I mean, and this is not something that's unique to Montana State either. I mean, the Cats have won one road playoff game ever. That's when they went to Sam Houston and won. But the Griz have only won one ever. They went to James Madison and won back in 2000.
Is it? I mean, that's crazy for you to say that. Like, I mean, think, and the Griz season they had last year, they rallied. Talk about peak performance. I think Bobby Hauck does a great job getting guys ready. Especially his emphasis on November football games. But look, man, if they're not at home for a lot of those playoff games, it looks different. Just like the Bobcat game gets, they get South Dakota State in the semis years ago to head into the national championship. Yes, they went and won that key road game on the road at Sam Houston, but the home field advantage it's huge. North Dakota State, how many road playoff games have they actually played? That was a big one last year. They came into Bozeman. But still, by the skin of their teeth, made it happen. And so, home field advantage, it matters, and you can't say any otherwise.
I mean, it's crazy, man. That the North Dakota State at Montana State was the first road win of their playoffs. That shows you. I mean, that was their formula though forever, right? They used to say Fargo to Frisco. You just roll through Fargo for 3 games, and then we're going down south to Frisco, and that's how it goes. So it's not just the Montana schools. Nobody wins on the road once you get down to it, all the way down the stretch. The one anomaly is Eastern Washington, man. And this is where Eastern Washington got sort of caught in the wash, is Eastern got to the semis year in and year out. And then what happens in Cheney, Washington? It turns just as cold as Montana, and it's blowing ass wind, and it's So then they're throwing the ball over the yard all the way through November, and then it gets so freaking cold, and they would lose. They lost to Towson, they lost to Youngstown State, they lost to Illinois State on their home field because they had Missouri Valley teams come in and ground and pound them to death. The irony is that Eastern then went away from all that. Now they've been trying to do ground and pound type stuff under Aaron Best, and it just hasn't worked for them. So they were the one that kind of got caught in the watch. They're the ones that did get the home field and still couldn't get through the playoffs.
Yeah, yeah. It's fascinating to look at, but yeah, you can't argue with the home field advantage. So going down the stretch, that's what these teams are playing for. Absolutely, conference championships and higher seeds means home field playoffs, but you got to tack it a week at a time, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out because I think South Dakota State they go to South Dakota. No, they welcome South Dakota this week. So again, South Dakota has done a good job against South Dakota State as of late. I don't know if they had any in the win column, but they're still really competitive. North Dakota State still got some meat on their bone as far as schedule is concerned. So a lot can happen. The Cats have still got to go to UC Davis, and then those rivalry games with the Cat Griz game. There's so much to play out, but it's the best part of the FCS season. This is as good as it gets, and I couldn't be more excited to watch play out.
Here's the thing that has been something I've had to balance in my mind is there's always been dominant teams in the Big Sky, at least my almost 20 years covering it, following it, all that. I do think, though, the middle teams used to be better. Like you used to see the Northern Arizonas and Portland States of the world, and they would have, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys that would play anywhere. Now, NAU is the greatest example, right? Like NAU would always have a half a dozen guys that, that guy would play anywhere. Montana, South Dakota State, that guy would play anywhere.
Yep.
They just don't have that quite as much anymore. That said, though, I think it makes the big games bigger because, like, you almost know that, like, UC Davis is just going to roll until they get Montana and Montana State, vice versa. Like, the teams are just going to roll until they meet each other, so that it makes the big games even bigger. But I think that also is ironic because it makes it so the games that you're supposed to just roll through, like the Griz playing Northern Colorado this week, for example, you absolutely have to win. Like there's no leeway for losing. And that's why Montana losing at home to a probably not that good Weber team, that really hurts their resume. And it makes it so that then they're going to have to steal one of those big games down the road probably to get to where they want to go.
Absolutely. The conference as a whole, it looks so much different, but I agree with your assessment. I don't think those middle tier teams, again, just from my time, I guess, playing and coaching, it just looks so much different. They're still those top 4 teams. The names have kind of changed. I think, NAU used to be a lot better. I mean, Eastern has just struggled, which is just crazy to see because it was such a dogfight with them for so long. Insert Idaho, which that's a perplexing situation given their quarterback carousel and injuries and everything. But it's such a competitive league.
Word is the starting guy is going to be back this next week. That helps Idaho.
Okay, so big time. I mean, and I've seen some of the playoff projections, and I'm kind of like, boy, the team I saw 2 weeks ago, they were not ready at all to go play in any playoff football. They got handled, but it matters who your quarterback is, as it turns out, regardless of the level of football. So good for Coach Yak to get somebody back. He obviously is a good signal caller. He clearly didn't break it all that bad against Oregon. Probably didn't need surgery. Those collarbones are a little bit tender. But good for them. But what a solid league, top to bottom. But I'm with you. It's kind of the middle teams are interesting. But there's still a ton of strength. And, the top tiers with, the notable names that we all know. So it's fun to see this sucker play out. There's a ton of meat left on the bone for all these games, and playing for home field advantage, man, it's exciting.
Is a will you marry me in your future? Or maybe you do it all over again. Hi, I'm Brian Toon with Jewelry Design Center, inviting you to come see the largest selection of Will You Marry Me in the state of Montana. The brightest diamonds of every shape and size, unique settings built to last, and skilled jewelers on site offering free sizing and maintenance for life, because that's how long we want to be your jeweler. Jewelry Design Center in Missoula, on Brooks, across from the Montana Club.
Big Sky Breakdown, proudly presented by the Bobcat Collective at Montana State. The Bobcat Collective is the NIL collective that serves Montana State University student athletes. The collective is partnered with Montana State to connect fans, alumni, businesses, and local nonprofits with Montana State student athletes. Opportunities through the collective allow student athletes to earn compensation while serving the greater Montana State University community. Sign up now for memberships and enjoy automatic entry into raffles for free tickets while supporting the bright minds at Montana State. They have multiple different membership tiers, and you can also be a one-time supporter, and you can also business partner or corporate supporter. Visit bobcatcollective.com for more. I know the Cats are off this week, so I got to ask you about Montana, because Montana, they were a wreck a couple weeks ago defensively. They figured some stuff out. I actually just got done interviewing Trevin Gradney. Did you coach Trevin at Billings West?
I did. Yep. I was his position coach at West. Yep.
Yeah. So great dude, great kid. But we were talking, and he was just talking about the 3-3-5 stack, just how unorthodox it is, how long it takes for guys to figure it out. And I think the transfer portion of this can't be understated. I think they had a whole bunch of they brought a whole bunch of transfers they expected to be play day one type of guys. They got the ability, they just don't know where they're going. And I think that's how you have like these just busted plays. I mean, Eastern Washington, those guys are running wide open. Nobody's even close. But it seemed
right up the seam, like, I mean, it was just seam, number 2 on the seam. And you could see those guys turn around looking at each other like, what? I'm expecting you to be there. I thought you were going to be there. And it's a sign of, youth. And, but look, Coach Cooper's a good buddy of mine. He's, we were grad assistants together at MSU. He's a heck of a ball coach. They'll get it figured out. And those guys, good leaders like Trev. Trev's an awesome kid. Great football player. They've got good players on that side, and they pride themselves playing. That Grizzly defense. They've had so many good defenses over the years with so many good players. I don't think they have some of those same dudes that they've had in the past, but particularly on the interior and the defensive line. I think their backers are pretty solid, but they'll get it figured out. And it's a tough system once they get going. It is organized chaos, and it's tough we've seen it. It's tough for offenses. The Cats have fallen, to that, and that was a tough showing last year in Missoula. But they'll be ready. Those guys will be ready to go. And look, failure is it does you fail forward. I think those guys do a good job of it. They'll be ready down in northern Colorado, if I had to guess. And Coach Hauck, late October, November, he'll have his teams ready to go.
You're so right. You could tell so much of it was communication with new defensive coordinators. Like guys were looking at each other like who's doing what. I think they got on the same page against NAU, though. I think they turned a good page. I think they flipped the switch a little bit, and they only gave up 6 real defensive points in that game. So certainly progress forward. Last thing for you, I know you worked for Coach Hauck for a little while down there in Vegas. What? I don't know if there is an answer to this, and maybe he's the only one that knows the answer to this, but his teams always seem to just get so much better in the second 2 weeks of October into the first 3 weeks of November.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is, just for the way he operates things?
Yeah, gosh, that's such a good question, Colter. And in all fairness, we didn't when I coached my one season for him.
Those UNLV days where the formula was not the same as it has been in the 13 years.
No. And look, man, we were quite the opposite. We went down on Thanksgiving and played, in Hawaii, and we got boat race. Boy, that was brutal on the headset. Let me tell you, we made them look like the New England Patriots, and they were not. But I can just make some outside assessment. I think there's an expectation too. There's an expectation in your program that as the season gets on and presses forward, especially late in the season, we're going to be the tougher, more disciplined, more physical team, and that's what Coach Hauck prides himself on. From winter conditioning all the way through the end, he still is of that old school mindset, right, wrong, or indifferent, that like the tougher team's going to win. And I agree with that in so many levels. Now, how do you be smart with that in terms of practice reps and all of that? that's for coaches to decide. But I think he emphasizes so much physical toughness and mental toughness and an expectation that in November it's expected that we're going to play our best football. And of course, that goes into drills and how you scheme and but I do think a lot of it's a decision you make in between your ears, and it starts with the head coach. And he's all about physicality and toughness and winning the game mentally.
I will say the last point I'll make on this is he has told me several times over the years that it takes him until about mid-October to know what kind of team he's got. Like, what do we do well? What's this team all about?
100%. 100%.
A lot of it is that the teams have had very similar makeup because he has such a defined formula for how he wants to make up his roster and his locker room at Montana specifically. But I also think that he doesn't give enough credit for a lot of times they do adjust. They can adjust and play in a little bit different way. Like last year,
Yep.
they adjusted a lot. They started playing more coverage on the back end and doing some different things. This year,
Yep.
I think that's going to be similar too. I think they realized they don't have the dudes in the middle of the defensive line and on the back end to run the kamikaze defense, like we call it, where you're just going balls to the wall and bringing 6 guys every single time. But I think you can still play some pretty adequate defense because like Gradney and the guys in the secondary, they can mix and match and stuff. They can do some zone schemes. So I think I think the Weber game was a stark reality check for them, but I think that they're going to adjust from that and to sort of cruise down the stretch.
Totally. And then same thing offensively. We saw it last year. They did a good job adjusting to, what Clifton McDowell's abilities were. And I thought it just continued to get better and better because, boy, middle of the season, I mean, I was thinking like, the Bobcats may run up to Missoula and, I mean, just put it on them like they did the year before in Bozeman. I really did think that. I think the Cats thought that. But they adjusted on offense. And what are they able to do? I mean, we've seen that slowly but surely. Like, okay, so I still don't know. You probably do, but who's their quarterback? Are they going with Fife? Because like you do have to eventually you get to a point where this is what Coach Hauck does. You have decisions along the way, and you're playing 2 quarterbacks. Eventually, you got to have a quarterback. You can't be in mid-October and November wondering who your quarterback is. So they will pick a quarterback. My guess is it's Fife. Do you know?
It still just remains to be seen because Hauck got dinged.
Yeah.
And then Fife took over when Hauck got dinged. And then Hauck came back last week and he busted his hand. But, I mean, nobody talks about injuries anymore besides Brent Vegan. Bless his heart. He's the only guy that says shit about injuries anymore. But Hauck doesn't say anything about injury. I mean, if you even asked him anything about his quarterbacks, he'll just rip your head off. So I have no idea. If it's me, I think Hauck is a special enough talent as a young guy that you have to figure out a way to keep him in the mix. You just have to. Some way, somehow. But if they just roll with Fife, I won't be surprised by that either, just because he's playing really well right now. So they have sort of this weird mess there. The good news for him is neither one of those guys is a bad option. In fact, both those guys are a better option than most of the quarterback options they've had for the last couple of years.
Yeah. I agree. I think both of them are good players. They both possess a little bit something different. It'll be interesting down the stretch. That's hard on defense is if you can find the right rhythm on offense. When you insert an Hauck in there for a hot hand and a package, and then and everybody's good with that style of play. We saw the Cats do it now for a couple years, but it's a delicate balance. But it's a luxury, man. If you got 2 quarterbacks that are somewhat capable, that's a luxury in football. There's no doubt. So they'll settle in and get it figured out. Coach Hauck, he's got a bunch of veteran coaches that have been around the game. They've seen a lot. And they'll make the proper adjustments. My guess is they'll peak at the right time here. And starting with a road win at Northern Colorado, weird place to play. That's a strange program. I think Ed McCaffrey did more damage than good from what we saw to that program. And it's a weird high school setting, not a lot of support. But they also have some guys here or there that can play. They do a lot of drop down, so a lot of transfers. So it'll be interesting to see. what shakes out. But my guess is the Griz will be in a good position as they head into late October and November football.
Riding with Ryder here on the Big Sky Breakdown, as well as Sky Sports YouTube channel. Mikey, thanks for being here, man. Good to talk to you.
Appreciate you, Colter. Thanks for having me, man.
There's always a party in Montana, whether you're going to a wedding, a football game, a concert. Montana Party Bus can get you there safe and will take you anywhere in Montana. You can relax with friends in style, luxury, and safety. Western Montana based for local and regional travel within Montana borders. Montana Party Bus is great for both large and small groups with a capacity of up to 30 guests. If you want to elevate your event, call them anytime, 406-200-8096. You can also visit mtpartybus.com. Travel anywhere in Montana in style with the Montana Party Bus.